Hi, hello guys. Welcome to Stack Life. Today's topic, we're going to allow you to ask us any questions about items and assemblies. I am going to wait a couple minutes, just making sure everybody gets signed in. But if you want, please go ahead and start sending out your questions using the Q&A button or chat button in the bottom of your screen. A little bit of housekeeping today. All of the participants joining us today will be in listen-only mode. And again, submit any questions during today's webinar using the Q&A button or the chat button in the bottom. And you will receive a recording of our meeting today via email. So don't worry if you missed something. You will be able to get back to it later on. My name is Crystal Elias, and I have been with Stack since 2018. Fun fact, I was one of the first bilingual trainers. Now we have many other trainers that can speak other languages. Besides helping customers with my Spanish-speaking skills, I'm also very well known for being very detail-oriented, helping problem-solving issues with the customers, and being creative on using current features for something that it might not was originally intended to be used for. So those are kind of some of my skills. Today, we do have Dave Elfers. He actually was one of my mentors when I first started with Stack, and he's actually known in the company as the math genius. He has helped with our catalog in engineering. He also helps perfecting our assemblies. And one of his latest project was helping out and contributing with our Stack AI. He's actually going to be joining us today, helping answering any questions while I present today. The agenda for today. I do want to review what are items and assemblies. And then I want to jump into answering your questions. The team and I have prepared a nice little cheat sheet or PDF document that will help you putting together and kind of trouble solve how to put an assembly together. And you will receive a copy of this PDF at the end of the day. And I also want to mention and talk briefly about our new features and new updates that we have made on items and assemblies. If you have been with Stack for a while, you may notice that it looks different than before. So I want to touch on those to make sure you're not missing of any of those features. So what are items and assemblies? So an item is going to be, it's going to help you to track anything that you need with a measurement. So this can be a material, it could be a labor, it could be an equipment. Items can be used to track a cost, but a lot of the times I see customers using items just to get a quantity. An example would be like nails. I had a customer, he needed to know how many nails he was going to use, but wasn't something that he really cared about itemizing on his estimate. When you're creating an item, I do suggest you to be as specific as possible on the name. So give it the size, the dimensions, the color, the brand, if that is something that is important to you. Those items and assemblies are going to be found under the library tab. And on the left side, next to the folder that you create, you click on the plus sign and you're going to be able to create an item. The item, how it works is that it helps you track the purchase unit of this material through a coverage rate. So in this example, I have pull up in here, I have concrete. And maybe I should have been specific and say 3,000 PSI concrete, right? And I'm telling the system that I'm going to be measuring this on a cubic yardage. So I'm either going to use my volume 2D or 3D measurement. And that for every 25 cubic yardage, I want to be able to track 1 truck of load. Feel free to put a waste percentage or track a waste percentage in here if you wanted to. So I can say 1.1 to account for a 10%. I will only advise you to do this if this is something that you do uh, no matter what, and you never change it. If you want to have the flexibility to sometimes do 5%, 10%, skip this step and use our estimate feature to account for waste. And then down here, as you can see, this is where you're going to be able to track the costs. You do have 4 of them by default: equipment, labor, material, and subcontract, but feel free to create more if you need to. One that I see often is miscellaneous. So go into your account settings and you will be able to create more. This helps you to kind of track what type of costs are you tracking with this item. Now, you can attach those items directly to your takeoff, but if you feel like you need to make a complex calculation, if you need to track a couple of items together, for example, concrete is a good example. There are different type of PSI for concrete, so it's not always 3,000, and I kind of want to have all the different concretes together. That's when you will create an assembly. Your assembly will be here in the bottom left corner. In this little tab, I have now this time it wall partition assembly open. When you create an assembly, is the same process. Go to your folder, click on the plus sign, give it a name. My tip for the name is that it makes sense to you, but I also would like for you to think about following or naming convention and indicating what type of measurement you intended this assembly to work with. You're going to be able to give it a unit of measurement, an item description, but notice that it does group into 2 sections, requirement items and item groups. Remember, requirement items, the word items is referring to this single item that we have created earlier. And require, what it means is that it's not like you're required to add an item, is that, okay, when I'm painting a wall or when I'm installing the drywall or when I'm pouring concrete, what are some things that are required that I want to make sure it automatically accounts for and never changes, and I want to make sure and guarantee that I don't miss it. That will go as a requirement item. Again, something that never changed, something that I necessarily need to do it. So some examples would be like labor if it's consistent. My labor is always the same, it's the same crew. If I'm painting, I'm gonna need people that are gonna have to paint the wall. Now, primer would not be something necessary since some of the times the walls are already pre-primed, or I might have different type of primers. So I need it, but there's different types, right? As I mentioned earlier, I need concrete, but there's different PSI of concrete that I will need when I'm pouring concrete. So that's when you will create your item group. These are the ones that creates a little drop down when you're adding an assembly, and you will group them by type. So all my concrete together, all my primers together, or my finishing paint together. And sometimes it's just one item. Sometimes I need to prime, sometimes I don't, and I always use the same primer. So sometimes your item groups just have one item to provide you flexibility to add it or not add it to the job. Let me make sure in here, checking my notes, that I didn't forget anything. And the assemblies, I'm sorry, allows you for complex calculations or so when I add an item to my assembly, I can leave it alone and keep using the coverage rate as I originally created the item, or I can overwrite that coverage rate. Um, Either because I need to take in consideration a variable, meaning like something that varies per job, like the thickness of the concrete. Sometimes it's 4 inches, sometimes it's 6 inches. The number of coats of primers that I do might be 1 or 2. So you're going to be able to create variables. Basically, a variable, what it is a little box that you can create that you input a number, and then that number can be used in the formula to come up with the correct totals. Um, Keep in mind, this is really important, is that all of these formulas will be calculated per measurement, okay? Now, now that I have give you guys a little overview of items and assemblies, I want to go ahead and answer some of your questions. Dave, do we have any questions coming in yet?
Yeah, I went ahead and slacked you a good one.
All right, let me take a look. So the first question today is there a way to add supervision into an assembly as a function of the labor associated with that assembly? We add 5% supervision based on the labor total for an assembly. So our assemblies don't look, well, I think one of the ways that you could think about doing that, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, do you think that if it's 5% of your total labor, 5% of the base on the labor, I will probably copy the same formula that you have used to come up with the total of your labor and then multiply that by 0.5. That should give you 5%. So it will be two different items. One item for your crew labor that will tell you the number of your labor, and then another item for your supervision, and get that do the same formula. So because you want the total of that labor, and then multiply by 0.5, and that should return the 5%. What do you think, Dave?
I think that works in certain situations. If, for example, there's only one labor item that you'll ever use per assembly, then this could certainly work. As soon as it gets more complicated, then I would recommend handling that in our estimates. Estimates, you're able to do things like apply a certain percentage based on another total within the estimate, and so it'll be very easy to um, uh, to add that 5% on your grand total of labor. So yeah, I guess it just kind of depends on how you do things now. Um, if that could work in an assembly.
Yeah, so just to show you guys what Dave is talking about, this kind of goes a little bit out of our scope of our meeting today, but I do want to share this with you guys. So when you guys are into our estimate worksheet tab, in the bottom right corner, you will see something called other cost, where you can actually grab a direct or indirect cost, give it a percentage. So for this scenario, will probably be at 5%. And you will tell it that you wanted to this be applied to the cost type. And then the cost type will be your material, either extended or no material, I'm sorry, I mean labor. So this will return the total of your labor, um, extended cost or base total, and then you can get a 5% additional cost to it. But if you're looking for hours, try exploring and playing with a solution that I mentioned earlier, because this will return a cost, but it won't really return like number of hours for for your for your supervision labor. Good question. Um, any other questions that have coming in?
Not yet.
No, yeah, perfect. So while we wait on your questions, I do want to mention Some of the most common questions I get, a lot of people ask me, okay, give me some guidelines. How do I do this? Am I doing my items and assemblies right? Well, I think as a personal answer for me is that if you're getting the results and the totals that you're intended to get, then yes, you are doing it right. Bottom line was important for you to get the correct quantities. So as long as you're getting the quantities and the results that you're looking for, then you're doing it right. There's not a right or wrong way to do things. I think each company and each customer have a different workflow that works for them and have a different way that they estimate. So one of the beautiful things about Stack is that it allows you to personalize it and mold it to your needs. So it has a lot of different ways that you can accomplish the same results. So results is what you want to look at. Um, the other questions that I get a lot is like, when should I use an assembly? When should I use an item? Well, you want to use an assembly, and I think about an assembly as a form, right? Or my checklist. So before I go to paint a house, or before I go to pour concrete, or before I go to install a wall, I think about it. I want to make sure I have all my tools. I want to make sure I have all my materials. So think about your assembly as a checklist, like a little form that you want to use to double check and select the materials you're going to need. So if I'm just fixing a wall, I will look at my checklist and it's going to remind me, hey, do you going to need that paint? Are you going to need that primer? Are you going to need to sand the wall? And then I can say, okay, you know what? For this job, it's already sand or it's already pre-primed, so I'm not going to need the primer. But it's a little check that is going to remind me, did I account for that? Did I took that in consideration? And when should I use an item? So items are very powerful because it gives you a coverage rate, right? And a lot of people go directly to an assembly. Like, I want to use an assembly. Assemblies are, um, very, a lot of people, like that name of assembly, everybody wants to use assemblies, but I have a lot of customers that they can just utilize items and they forget, and I want to make sure I mention this today, is that you can add items directly to a takeoff and save them for the future. Or you can add assemblies to a takeoff and save it into your library of takeoff. So if your item always have a very consistent coverage rate, and to give you an example, painting trays will be one of them. Flooring will be one of them, where it's very consistent and it's very straightforward. Every 40 square feet is going to be a box of laminated flooring. Every 9 square feet is going to be a roll of yard of carpet. So keep it sometimes sometimes less is more, right? Sometimes the items will get you the result that you want. They're going to be easy to maintain. And don't forget that you can combine items and assemblies. So a lot of times in customer service, I get customers asking me, I got this ad material, like they're asking for this material. They're asking for this additional RC channel, or they're asking for double studs on the corners. I never see that. This is a particular job, different building. And they're like, I need to build the assembly. I was like, but do you? Do you really need to create an assembly? Can you just add an additional item, especially since it's something that you're just seeing on this project, you've never seen it before? Um, to save you time, just create the item, add it to your assembly, add it to your takeoff, I'm sorry, in combination with the assembly that you normally use. That way you can get your total and don't really have to invest too much time on updating your assembly because it's something that you're probably never going to see again, right? So don't forget that. Um, Perfect. Dave, any other questions? Start seeing some questions coming up in here.
Yeah, we got a flood. Okay, next
Awesome.
question, if you want to answer that. Can we download materials from a vendor's Excel sheet?
That's a great question. And I actually was going to touch on that because it is really crucial for you guys to have a list of all your materials or items in Stack. We actually do have two options. We have the option to import that list of materials from your vendor or that list of materials that you may have in Excel already, catalog of your materials and costs. Again, I keep saying materials, but remember this could be your labor cost, your equipment, your material. We do have a template that you can fill out and it does have to be filled out in a specific way. We do have a training video as well that you can find on a help guide, and you can also import it. So export it, sorry. So you can import your materials, and once they're in the system, if you ever need to do a price update or maybe you need to change the name, you're going to be able to export it into an Excel spreadsheet template or sheets. It's basically a CSV file and update it and then import it back in. So mass item import and export is now available in Stack, especially for those customers that have been with us for a long time. Um, Keep that in mind if you need to make any updates and managing your items. While I'm in that topic, before I forget, you also will be able to arrange your items into folders. Just click on it, hold it, and drag it and drop it into folders. That's something that it's also a new improvement that Stack has been made in assemblies as well. So keep that in mind if you need to. Next question, Dave.
Yeah, Jeff asks, can you create a count item that asks a user for its size? For example, wall panels. They can range in size from like 2x4 or 2x6, or I'm sorry, 4x6, and it returns a square foot quantity.
Could you repeat that again? Can you create an item that asks you for the size? So if you
Hmm.
want the system to ask you for a size, I think the best way for you is creating an assembly. So when I create an assembly using the option of an item group is how I'm going to be able to list all the different sizes that you can have or all the different types, and it creates a drop down. So let's create one really quick. We're gonna I'm just gonna call it list for now. We're gonna make this into a square footage since that's what the example you gave us. And I create an assembly. Item groups is gonna be a way for you to create that drop down. So I would do something like choose size. And then I can click on items. I'm gonna use the stacked items and I'm gonna search for studs since we're talking about lumbers. And I have different length of studs in here. So I'm gonna add those in here. Now, just to make sure I keep best practice, we're gonna say area in here. We're gonna click on save. Now we're gonna go to our project. And this is what you would need. I think this is what you're looking for. We're gonna create an area measurement. We're gonna create that takeoff and we're gonna add that assembly that I created. So I think this is what you're looking for. You're probably looking for something that gives you a drop down where you're gonna be able to pick and choose the size. Now, when you pick the size, whatever size that you pick is what's gonna calculate for you. And then based on the size in the formula. So when you go into because I think the next part of that question was, I want to make sure I calculate the correct coverage rate for that material. So in the item, when you create it, if you have plugged in the correct coverage rate, great, don't touch it. But if you don't, if you want to make sure it makes if you need to customize the coverage rate, feel free to use the formula to make sure it comes out with the correct total. Again, going back into the takeoff, don't forget that you can save now this takeoff into your library for future usage. So next time I start a new project, I will be able to go into my library and look for that list takeoff. Click on the plus sign to add it to your project. Sometimes I just want to add takeoff and then do them later. Or click on the arrow to start measuring, and then boom, it's going to ask you, hey, do you still want to use this material or do you want to change the size? If I would have left it as none and then added to my library, then it would be none. I think that is better for security purpose. I don't want it to calculate something if I forget. And if I leave it at none, I know I'm missing something. Good question. Do you agree with that answer, Dave? Let's see. So I'm getting another question from Greg. It says, I want to remove ceiling functions. I want to remove ceiling functions from many of my assemblies. The issue is when I get to my estimate worksheet, I will have to manually adjust the quantities to full number count of items. Is there going to be a roundup function to add it to the estimate worksheet to purchase quantity to achieve this so I can eliminate my potential overage that I don't need to encounter by ceiling functions? Oh, the ceiling functions, yes. Yes, I know what you mean now. Yes, a matter of fact, I'm in the product console. We have weekly meetings about our new features. It is something that we are working on. We're thinking about giving you an option to round numbers on that specific grouping or rounding up the whole columns. We haven't worked out the specifics on how it's going to work, but we are definitely working on that. So basically, what Greg is asking is that, as I mentioned earlier, when you're working with an assembly and you're doing a formula, that formula is being applied per each measurement that you do. So if I measure one room and it was 510 and I tell it to round up to the next 100, it's going to round up to 600. And if the other room is 150, it's going to round up to 200. So instead of me being able to do 700, right? 550 plus 550 square feet plus 150. Instead of just saying 700, boom, it's a round number, let's move on. It's going to round up each individual measurement. So the way that you want to round up your total is going to be on the estimate. Once you are done doing your measurements, then you can play with your totals. So once you're here, if I wanted to round up this number, you can click on 700 and it rounds it up. So we are working on that. We are working on the details on that for sure. So keep your eyes open for that. The next question that I'm getting in here is there a way to set a material cost that are project specific without changing the item each time? Is there a way to set material cost that are project specific without changing each time, or material pricing changes depending on the quantities? Okay, so I'm gonna give you two answers. Answer number one, if your pricing changes a lot. Lumber, metal is something that changes pretty much like by the hour now. I think it has slowed down. Maybe it changes by weekly. So if you have a material that changes price all the time, I would just put a standard price on the item or leave the item as zero. Wait until I'm here on my estimate with the vendor on the phone or with a contract signed that the vendor is gonna give me that material at that price and then put my pricing in here. As you can see in the estimate, if you have $1 in here, you can actually change it. But by changing it in here, it's not going to change in my library. So this will be estimate specific because it wouldn't be project because you can have more than one estimate per project. So it would be estimate specific. Unless you make a copy, then it will be the same price, right? The other answer I have for you is that when you say that your item or your material changes on size, so and then the price changes, I would probably create one item for each size. So paint comes to my mind. You can buy 1 gallon paint or you can buy a 5 gallon paint. Okay. So a 5 gallon will probably cover like 1,200 square feet. So, but if I have anything that is less like than 300 square feet, I probably, or 600 square feet, I might just want to buy the 2 gallons instead. So what I would do with that, and this is a new feature as well, guys, is that when you are on your estimate, you're going to be able to right click and edit the assembly input. So my answer to that will be create 2 items or create as many items as you need for the specific sizes and their corresponding pricing, and create a drop down like we showed earlier. And if you get to your estimate, you say, you know what, it would have been better if I used the bigger size. You're gonna be able to right click on your estimate and adjust and edit your formula and change your material as needed in here without having to go back. So this is a new feature. If you haven't seen, it's up here in the top right corner. We let you know everything about any updates. We do pretty much like weekly updates. So definitely keep an eye on this present. So hope that answers your question. Next question that we have in here, is there a way in items when labor cost is concerned, I can insert the hourly rate in labor box with number of men hours estimate for the project? Is there a way in items when labor cost is concerned, I can insert the hourly rate in the labor box with number of men hours estimating for the project? Okay, I see. So basically, I understand that this person wants to be able to track the crew size and the hours. So for that, I would definitely create items for crew sizes. So here in Stack, we have pretty good examples where we'll use crew sizes for our labor. So let me see if this is a good example. So basically, if I go into my library, let me see if I can pull it up quickly for you guys in here. I wonder if it's going to be under crew. Let's search here under labor. You can see how here we have created one cement mason and one labor. Then my next item in here is one mason person and 2 labor people. And I will attach the corresponding coverage rate of labor and the correct number of hours. Now with the pricing, you gotta be careful because if I'm paying, I got 3 people, let's say we all pay the same and I pay them $10 an hour. That means that my cost per hour will be $30 because I got 3 people. And then in here, I got 2 people, so my cost per crew hour will be $20. So you will have to create an item for each crew size and create an item group to be able to pick the crew that you want. And then on the estimate, if you feel like the job is too big or too small, you need to reduce it, then you can adjust it. Now, I'm going to do one more question, and then I do want to go over into the assembly workflow and mention the new items and assemblies updates that we have. I'm very excited to share that with you guys today. The last question we have for today is, could you show how to add items to a library where you can pick that item as a takeoff of measurement on plans? I tried to add a new item to my company's folder. However, I could not show up in the library when I tried to look for it in the plans and takeoff tab. Okay, yes. So when you run into this problem, so remember guys, when I created that assembly earlier, that was it. I call it list, right? So this assembly that I call list, I told it that I would use this for any square feet measurement. And this is going to work with an area takeoff. So you have to be careful that when you're working with an item or working with an assembly, that it's going to match the unit of measurement. Because when I'm under plans and takeoff, inside it takeoff. So if I click in here, this is a square feet assembly. It's only going to show me items and assemblies that are compatible for this takeoff. So we added a safeguard that is only going to allow you to see items that are compatible with that measurement. So you're not going to see anything here that says linear feet equals to, like 100 linear feet is equal to 1 row. Like, because it's an area takeoff, you're only going to see items and assemblies that are compatible with it, that has the word square feet in here, or that you told it that you were going to measure that item as a square feet. So this item right here that I created, this is going to be a good example. If I go into my project, which is a surface area, and I try to look for it, you're not going to find it because it is not going to be compatible with it. It is in my library, but it's not going to show. It's going to say impossible. I can't calculate how many truckloads you need out of a square footage. I need more information to that. But if I go to volume 3D and I try to add it in here and look for it, it's going to be here. Make sure it's saved. Let me refresh because I have many tabs in here. So take a look at the unit, the takeoff that you're doing, and take a look at how you create your items to make sure they are compatible. Now, let me see if I can. Not showing. There it is. So you can see that it's now showing because it is compatible with this one. But if I go to an area measurement, it's not going to come up because it's not compatible. It's not the same unit of measurement. So take a look at that. Good question, guys. Really good questions. Really surprised at the variety of questions that you guys have sent out. Now, the team and I have created this little custom assembly workflow that you guys are going to be able to, you guys are going to get a copy later today on the follow-up email. So I'm going to pull it up in here. This is what you're going to get. The first thing, this is for assemblies. The first thing you're going to take in consideration in this follow-up, that last question is like, how am I going to measure this? Am I measuring this for area because I want the square footage, linear? So you have about 13 different measurements in here. Then you want to talk, then the next question you want to ask yourself is, does the item is always used or needed every single time in the assembly? So every time that I paint a wall, do I prime the wall? If I do, then it's going to be a requirement item. If I prime it and it's the same primer every single time, it is going to be a requirement item, okay? But if I use a primer, sometimes I prime, sometimes I don't. And if I do, I have water-based prime, non-water-based prime, and I have any other type of primers I might not be familiar with, then that's going to be an item group where I will be able to have a drop down and select different options, right? So I'm going to be able to choose from the list, and then sometimes I prime, sometimes I don't. So if I don't prime, I just don't choose anything and it's not going to get calculated. Now, So the requirement items, if it's always needed and only, so keep in mind that the requirement item is always going to be needed. It's always going to be the same option and it's like a generic item. And then does the coverage rate of that item changes? If it does not change, then I leave it alone. If it's 300 square feet equals to 1 gallon, I'll leave it alone. But if I need to take in consideration the number of layer of prime that I have to do, then you want to override it with a formula. In this scenario, I will probably create a variable that asks me for the layers of primer and calculate based on that. And then on the formula, when you're creating a formula, keep in mind that if you're measuring an area and want to do a calculation with the total square foot, you want to use your variable called measure area, measure linear, and even surface area. So a lot of customers will use area thinking, oh, I'm using surface area, is returning square feet. No, we have a specific takeoff for that. So be careful. Same with linear and linear with the drop, pitch linear. Each individual measurement has their own. And we do take in consideration the measure height and the measure width for volume 2D and 3D. And then do I need to create a custom variable? You'll know if you need to create a custom variable if there's a number in the formula or in the calculations that you do that varies. Anything that varies, like the number of codes, the height of the concrete, that is going to be a variable that you will manually input it as you start reading the requirements and the specifications of on the drawings and the details for it. Perfect. So you're going to get a copy of this, and I'm really excited. I'm super happy that we made that. And then I want to talk about what's new. So number one of the new things, it has been around a while, but remember you can mass import your list of items from your vendors as easy as a copy and pasting, or if you already have an existing Excel spreadsheet or a list of your materials, you can import and export those if you need to. That one is very helpful. The other one that I want to talk about is that when I create an item and I have used it on an assembly, so I have a carpet installation labor item in here that I use on one assembly. So we have made this link, which is very helpful because now I can see if I change anything in here, like the unit of measurement, is it going to affect my assembly and which assemblies is it going to affect? So you're going to be able to click on the name and it's going to take you to that assembly, and now you can double check that where is it being used, how is it being used, and is it going to affect if you change anything. And once you're here, you're going to be able to click on this icon and it's going to open up that item, because a lot of times you find out that you need to change the item when you're putting the assembly together. So we have made those links for you so you don't have to look for them. You can see this item is actually using 3 assemblies. So if I make any changes, I might need to take in consideration what am I changing and what is it going to affect. The other change that we made in here is that now we remember your purchase unit. So I have found out that a lot of customers have days, lowercase, uppercases. So now we remember them. That way you don't have so many variations and you can standardize your purchase unit. I really, really like this. And then if you don't have something in the list, then you can add it. The other one is one of my favorite ones. I heard this one for a long time, and I know I've been here with Stack for 6 years. So I want to be able to click, hold, and drag the order of my items, either requirement items or items in here. We made them a lot easier. And then you can also arrange and organize the item groups and the order that they're going to be shown on your assembly. This has been one of our recent updates, and I love it, love it. The other thing you can see in here is that we added options for you to make notes or add descriptions. So I created this item group, and I can add a brief description. So if I'm collaborating with a team, they know what needs to be here, why did I create this item group for, and leave notes for my future self or for my team. We also added notes on the items. So any item description is able to be shown on an estimate or a proposal. I will probably put in here characteristics of the items that I want to show on the proposal. So if this material is fire rated, if it meets certain criterias and a specification for the job, you may want to show those on your proposal. So you want to put those in here. But any notes that are related to this material, maybe I want to put information about the vendors I'm getting this from, their phone numbers, the price, how they get delivered, or if I have my own storage and my own warehouse, where's it being stored? Who do I need to talk to get this material reserved and ready for the project? You will go in here. You can write any notes to collaborate with your team in here. And the next one is the inside the formula editor. When you create a variable and you need to look for it, we have added this little search bar. So now you don't have to search and look for it. You can just type and find it. The other thing that we have added is the list of different functions that you can use in Stack. Earlier today, Greg was talking about the ceiling function. So if you want to do some rounding per measurements, you're going to be able to click on this plus sign. It's automatically going to drop the formatting that you need to use. Just click on it, highlight it, and then I can substitute it with a different variable. So we're trying to make it as easier as possible to limit any errors on your formulas. I know that if you have an extra parentheses there, it kind of gets tricky to find the error. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible and for you guys. Perfect. All right, so that was some of our updates, guys. Just to wrap this up and a follow-up, just all of the participants today, I just want to thank you for showing up today. Thank you so much for participating and sending your questions. Feel free to use the chat feature in the bottom right corner to ask any questions during business hours in the future. You will receive a recording of our meeting. You will receive a copy of the research that we put together for you. And feel free to schedule additional training if you want to meet with one of us one-on-one and have a specific questions. We can walk you through it. You can share your screen and log in into your account. We can walk you through it. And please stay tuned for our next Stack Live. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you. You guys have a wonderful day and take care. See you next time.